Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen, we begin with a Bloomberg News exclusive. Sources tell Bloomberg News that Chinese authorities are discouraging local firms from using Nvidia's less advanced H20 processor, particularly for government-related purposes. We're told the directive also includes AI accelerators from advanced micro devices, though it's unclear whether the notices specifically mention AMD. We get more from Bloomberg's Min Lo in Hong Kong.
Definitely very significant. The timing as well, very significant, coming on the day when President Trump had announced the extension of the trade truce. And we know China had been pushing so hard for the rolling back of these tech curbs. And clearly, China doesn't see the reversal of the decision to sell H20 chips to China as a win or a concession at all.
Bloomberg's Min Lo reports Chinese regulators have raised security concerns about Nvidia's H20 chip. Nvidia has repeatedly denied any vulnerabilities, but checking the shares right now, Nvidia is down about 0.4% pre-market. Advanced Micro Devices is little changed.
Well, Nathan, elsewhere in U.S.-China relations, Washington and Beijing have agreed to keep their tariffs at current levels for another 90 days. The two sides initially reached a 90-day pause in May. The extension that lasts until November 10th maintains this trade status quo between the world's two largest economies and follows a series of tit-for-tat hikes and export restrictions on rare earth magnets and certain technologies. Wendy Cutler, vice president of the Asia Society Policy Institute, says even with the extension, negotiations will not be easy.
There's not a lot of time for these negotiations to proceed, so now they can really put their energies and attention on the key outstanding issues, including export controls, critical minerals, excess capacity, you name it. There's lots of issues on the agenda and not a lot of time to come up with negotiated solutions.
Wendy Cutler with the Asia Society Policy Institute spoke after President Trump announced the extension of the truce in a Truth Social post.
Well, another announcement from the president that's getting a lot of attention in the nation's capital, Karen, is he plans to take federal control of the police department in Washington, D.C. President said that in a news conference heard right here on Bloomberg Radio, saying he'll also deploy 800 National Guard troops in the district to fight crime.
Today, we're declaring public safety emergency in the District of Columbia. And Attorney General Pam Bondi, who's fantastic, is taking command of the Metropolitan Police Department as of this moment. And I'll be making the appropriate notifications to Congress.
President Trump also threatened to insert federal personnel into other cities, including New York and Chicago, if they don't crack down on, quote, out-of-control crime. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser is responding, saying the president's announcements were, in her words, unsettling and unprecedented.
I can't say that given some of the rhetoric of the past, that we're totally surprised.
That's D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser. Justice Department statistics show violent crime in the nation's capital hit a 30-year low in 2024.
Well, staying in D.C., Nathan, President Trump named E.J. Antony, an economist with the conservative think tank the Heritage Foundation, as the new head of the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. The president dismissed the previous chief following a weak jobs report that included several revisions. The president claimed the report was rigged against him. President Trump is promising future data releases will be, quote, honest and accurate. Bloomberg's senior editor Derek Wallbank says the faith in U.S. economic data remains uncertain.
Antony will be under an exorbitant amount of pressure to prove to lawmakers and to prove to economists and to market participants that the BLS numbers are accurate, they were accurate, and they will be accurate.
Bloomberg senior editor Derek Wallbank adding that Antony will still need to be confirmed in the position by the Senate.
Of course, another Senate confirmable position that's opening up, Karen, is the Federal Reserve Chair. And two Trump administration officials tell Bloomberg News Fed Vice Chairs Michelle Bowman and Philip Jefferson, along with Dallas Fed President Lori Logan, are under consideration for the job when Jay Powell's term expires next spring. The officials say Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent will interview additional candidates in the coming weeks and make a recommendation to President Trump on a short list. The Fed's next policy meeting scheduled for September 16th and 17th.
And ahead of that policy meeting, Nathan, the Fed will get a slew of economic data this week, including the first of two inflation reports this morning due out at 8:30 Wall Street time. Bloomberg's Michael McKee joins us with a preview of the July Consumer Price Index.
This inflation report is one that should live up to the hype. The weak jobs report August 1st convinced investors the Fed will cut rates in September, but that will require inflation remaining relatively benign. A small increase today should open the door for a cut, although there's another CPI report before the next Fed meeting. A bigger tariff-driven increase would make a cut that much more problematic. Watch to see if annual core inflation breaches the 3% mark. Michael McKee, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Mike, thanks. In other economic news, gold held a loss after President Trump said imports of gold bars won't be subject to tariffs. That was after Customs and Border Protection ruled they would be. Gold has climbed more than a quarter this year, supported by geopolitical and trade tensions, along with central bank purchases. COMEX gold this morning is down 0.2%, trading at $3,399 an ounce.
Nathan, President Trump is downplaying his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin scheduled for Friday in Alaska. The president says it's a feel-out meeting and that he'd speak with other world leaders afterwards as he seeks a ceasefire in the war in Ukraine. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has not been invited to the summit and says he's skeptical about the Kremlin's motives.
Putin is determined only to present a meeting with America as his personal victory and then continue acting exactly as before, applying the same pressure on Ukraine as before. So far, there is no indication whatsoever that the Russians have received signals to prepare for a post-war situation.
Vladimir Zelensky speaking through an interpreter. Ukraine and its European allies have been pushing for a halt to the fighting and freezing the current front line as a first step before talks on a more enduring settlement.
And back in Washington, Karen, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says he thinks he could have made the markets react more positively to President Trump's Liberation Day tariff announcement. In an exclusive interview, Bloomberg Businessweek looks at how the Treasury Secretary has become the Trump cabinet member that Wall Street trusts. And we get more from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
Many traders look to Scott Bessent as a moderator, someone who reins in the White House's impulses. But the Treasury Secretary tells Bloomberg Businessweek he merely advises President Trump, helping him translate his populism into economic policy. The modest approach can't hide that Bessent has been tapped to take on some of the most difficult assignments of Trump's second term. But despite being the favorite on Wall Street, one area the Treasury Secretary has not yet managed to grip is the U.S. fiscal deficit, which he campaigned on getting down to 3%, but is now set to grow after blockbuster tax cuts. In New York, Jeff Bellinger, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Jeff, thank you. Our interview with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is the cover story of the latest edition of Bloomberg Businessweek. You can check it out in today's Bloomberg Big Take. It's on the Bloomberg terminal and at Bloomberg.com.
Time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. A federal judge in New York says transcripts of the secret grand jury testimony that led to the sex trafficking indictment of Jeffrey Epstein's former girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, should not be released. The judge suggested Monday the Justice Department's real motive for wanting the transcripts unsealed was to fool the public with an illusion of transparency. Maxwell is serving a 20-year prison term. Maxwell recently was interviewed by the Justice Department and was moved from a prison in Florida to a prison camp in Texas. Epstein died in jail awaiting trial. An explosion at a U.S. steel plant that shook the ground near Pittsburgh left 2 dead and sent at least 10 to hospitals. An Allegheny County spokesperson says an explosion followed by several smaller blasts happened Monday morning at the Clairton Coke Works. U.S. Steel's Kurt Barshik.
The rest of the plant is stable and secure, so there's no additional impact as far as any gas or utilities.
U.S. Steel's Kurt Barshik. Authorities say they are done with the recovery phase of the operation and will now start the investigation into what caused the blast. Police in Austin, Texas say a suspect is in custody after opening fire outside a Target store Monday afternoon, killing 3 people. Police say they spotted the suspect as he hijacked a car and then drove away. He crashed less than 2 miles down the road, ditched that car, and then hijacked another vehicle. Police chased him to South Austin. They finally caught up with him tased him, and arrested him. Today and tomorrow, some Americans might be able to witness one of the most active meteor showers of the year. The Perseid meteor shower will peak for North America specifically early Wednesday. But the American Meteor Society warns a particular bright moon might make it hard for it to see. Derek Pitts is the chief astronomer at the Franklin Institute.
It can show us as many as 100 meteors per hour if we go outside and take a look at the night sky under clear, dark skies.
Astronomer Derek Pitts. Global news 24 hours a day, and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg, Karen.
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update, brought to you by Flushing Bank. And here is John Stashower. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Just what the Yankees needed when in need of a win. A visit from the Minnesota Twins, who the Yanks have been dominating seemingly forever. In fact, since 2002, the Yanks against the Twins, 124 wins, 44 losses. They used the long ball at the stadium. Cody Bellinger homered in the first inning. Giancarlo Stanton and Ben Rice back-to-back in the third. Jazz Chisholm in the eighth. All four homers, solo shots. Solid pitching from Will Warren, the rare time when a Yankee starter actually worked into the seventh inning. The Yanks won 6-2. Red Sox lost 7-6 in Houston. It was Alex Bregman's first game back, where he played for 9 years, and he homered in the first inning. The Phillies won 4-1 at Cincinnati to go 6 games ahead of the Mets, who are at Citi Field tonight against Atlanta. After getting swept in Milwaukee, Carlos Mendoza sounded like the manager of a team with a 7-game losing streak.
I keep saying we got the talent, we got the players, but until we start playing better and getting the job done, we continue to believe in the guys, and we will. He's tough. I know he's tough right now. He's very frustrating. We're all very frustrated, but you got to keep going.
As for those red-hot Brewers, a 10th win in a row, 7-1 over Pittsburgh. First time ever the Texas Longhorns will begin a season ranked number 1, but in another first, they'll be an underdog in their season opener at Ohio State, who in the AP preseason poll is ranked 3rd, just behind Penn State. Buckeyes are 2nd in the coaches poll. Third-round tennis in Cincinnati. Wins for top seed Yannick Sinner and Americans Taylor Fritz and Francis Tiafoe. Tommy Paul lost. Women's top seed Aryna Sabalenka beat Emma Raducanu in a third-set tiebreak. She's won her last 16 tiebreaks. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Karen, Nathan.
Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Daybreak coming up after this.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager. Well, the tariff truce between the U.S. and China may be extended another 90 days, but plenty of tension points remain, not the least of which is access to U.S. chips. And Bloomberg News has learned China is now urging its local companies to avoid using Nvidia's H20 processor, just as the Trump administration's been pushing to turn sales of those chips in China into a government windfall. For more on this, we're joined by Bloomberg's Kriti Gupta. Kriti, good morning. What more do we know about this reported directive from the Chinese government?
Well, Nathan, good morning. This is an ongoing issue and one that has been a source of tension between the United States and China for some time. What we do know is that these were letters that were not really a directive, but more of guidance by some of the regulators and the authorities in China towards not only various government departments that may have a dependence on these kind of chips, but also smaller businesses as well that may be looking to grow and grow their dependence specifically on those American chips. Again, these were letters deployed a couple of months ago that have now kind of made it to the surface. But I think it speaks to this broader point of the U.S. and China, and not only the trade tensions, but also how competitive China can be when it comes to not only the chip space, but the AI space as well. And this is something that a theme that we explored earlier this year with the DeepSeek conversation, where suddenly the market got very scared of the idea that actually there could be an alternate offering from China. And that's exactly where the fear lies when it comes to these H20 chips and Nvidia, in that if you start to lower your dependence from China, which is a major kind of revenue contributor for Nvidia's bottom line, does that mean China has an alternative? And that's really the question that's circulating at the moment.
And of course, this comes at a time, Kriti, when Nvidia has openly said they're trying to recoup billions in revenue that they've lost in the Chinese market. They are really trying to get back into that market. What could this mean for Nvidia and AMD if this guidance goes through for them?
Well, for context for our global audience, 95% of the market is dominated by Nvidia. The other 5% is about AMD, and the remaining players have a marginal kind of piece of that pie. What it means is that on Friday we had heard that Nvidia had gotten those export licenses with the caveat of having to pay the 15% revenues right back to the U.S. government. So it's very clear that they do need that exposure. And Jensen Huang has been quite vocal about his desire to not just be someone that caters to one market or another, not just catering to the hyperscalers, the Apples, the Microsofts, the kind of biggest tech players of the world, but really diversifying into a variety of industries, things like medical equipment, things like smaller companies that really need to not only use the chips, but are able to kind of help with NVIDIA's revenue base as well. We are not there yet. And that's where NVIDIA really finds a little bit of vulnerability when it comes to the Chinese market and ultimately the 15% they're going to have to pay for the U.S. government. I thought another key piece of this is we've been talking about the H20 chip, which is kind of a watered down version that has been specifically created under the Biden administration, by the way, to cater to a Chinese customer, but isn't really using as high tech of the technology for, again, Chinese military, Chinese technology, et cetera. NVIDIA's Blackwell chip is the far superior technology. And now it looks like Donald Trump is thinking about how to kind of utilize that American technology and where it needs to be protected and where it needs to be deployed. So that's another angle to be thinking about for NVIDIA.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak, your morning podcast on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed by 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 92.9 in Boston, and nationwide on Sirius XM Channel 121.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, now with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto interfaces.
And don't forget to subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. It's the latest news whenever you want it, in 5 minutes or less. Search Bloomberg News Now on your favorite podcast platform to stay informed all day long. I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.